All right, here we go again. Something came up as soon as I stopped speaking, and we try to get that out. Now, what's happened to the Democratic Party? Again, when we name it progressive, we name it this. It's just not real. It's a little. It's pretty simple, I think, and I think it's happened to the Republican Party too. It's why we have everybody becoming independent, because there was a libertarian, but they're not quite libertarian as far as, again, when we name something, they're not libertarian like the Libertarian Party. They're more Ronald Reagan libertarian. Remember, Ronald Reagan was a Democrat for a period of time. So what happened is the liberals, socialism is not liberality, it's not liberal. Right? So the liberals left the Democratic Party, so a lot of them, libertarian type liberal, but not full, not to say the Libertarian Party, because there's liberals, the classic liberals left the Democratic Party, and some altered and changed and left and stayed in the Democratic Party, but became quote unquote progressive. But again, it's steered in the wrong direction. Sounds good, but it's not really progressive. In a lot of cases, it's regressive. It's just changing ownership of the regression. So we have to develop a formula for income in New York City. I'm not going to get that deep into it. I don't know if you want to knock out anybody over a certain income and just consider the people under that income. Say we're going to serve the people making less than $70,000, and then look at what the percentages are at that point and what people are actually making. Well, because again, the Democratic Party said that the wealth is held by one, and say, still say, I saw it the other day, I think it's 1.5% of the planet. I don't know what the wealth breakdown is in New York City as far as the population. But you may be, because a larger portion of the 1.5% are white, you're holding that against poor white people. But again, it's like, what percentage of white people? Now in New York, it's probably larger, but again, they have nothing in common. The white people who live in AOC's district have nothing in common with the white people that live in the Trump Tower, or wherever else you want to look at. I'll use even Trump's name so that'll help you. Yeah, Trump people. So we have to figure out a formula. Some mathematician can do it pretty easy. And just find somebody honest. Please don't use math and still be dishonest. Well, again, and there are black people that say we can't give money to these poor black people because Moore has identified, as we should have identified, and some of us had, that our people are on dope. And if we give them money, they're going to buy more dope. It's not going to get us anywhere. Now, here's the other one. Well, we're thinking like we're going to give all New York City contracts to black contractors. The poor black person is not going to get the contract. The rich black person who has a house in Florida, just like the white person, thinks like the white person, they're going to get the contract. And there are rich black people that are actually in that thought. They agree. Well, because we want to fix the problem. We don't want to continue the problem just so people can donate money to your scams, whether they be NGO or politician. Both sides of the aisle. And we can even say all sides of the aisle. So one of your most, again, we inside safe is what they call it, but it's larger than that. Well, our worst off people are addicted people. And again, believe me, some would have been scientists, some would have been inventors, some would have been generals. So the Inside Safe program is something that this guy Vic uses also. That guy Vic, the good boss, is Inside Safe. I called it, when I first came up with that kind of idea, home cities. No longer homeless. We build home cities that house people that are, and it's socialism. Essentially, my answer was a form of socialism, because in that it's how the U.S. government responds to things over history. Did not our form of government did not define our response. The political party in power did not define our response. The military had an obligation. The State Department had an obligation. They felt to bring China, or not bring China, bring South Korea back up, to bring Germany back up. Most nations that we fight against would do well after the war. Once we won, that was it, and then we built them back up. In fact, positive things that are still in Afghanistan are left over from the United States. So we would engage in socialism in Japan, in South Korea, in Germany, until we could restore capitalism. And this is the key. That's what you want. But capitalism doesn't mean you necessarily own a business, right? Or you run a business. Being a cog in that machine. So again, when we look at what's going on in New York City in the Black culture, and it is pretty bad because they are the most addictive. And I think part of that, again, when we look at the gateway drug scenario, I think that's mission creep over the years. Well, Black community in New York is probably one of the biggest cannabis smokers before it was legal, and even before it was popular as it became. Again, I'm not saying anything about Black people in Alabama. You continue to go to church, tell your kids don't smoke cannabis. And in New York City, that's part of the church. The Church of Rasta. So again, culturally, cannabis was accepted. Again, gateway drug is an issue, but it's not an issue if we regulate and police. Again, if you're buying illegal cannabis, there's probably illegal drugs, other drugs around. And again, in Ross Township, they were selling legal, like spice stuff, whatever it was still legal. They were working on making it illegal, but they also found they were selling cannabis, and I think maybe something else. I can't remember. So again, this is a law enforcement investigative model that needs to be continually looked at, especially in legalized cannabis locations. So the Inside Safe idea, I brought up originally calling it, I think, home cities. I wasn't online all the time. I would just speak out in the community in public places, that kind of thing, or in conversation with former addicts and even people that were addicted at the time. And maybe some of the other people in the religious communities that I visited and maybe, volunteered in for a while. So for the worst off, and again, you have to take that Black community and you have to use some math in the Black community as to, social science, psychology. What are we actually dealing with? What are you actually looking at? And, based upon what we see in the videos on YouTube and all that, you're probably looking at the addicted people, and that's where you have to start. Again, another thing you do, you teach, again, we used to teach basic finances, and I don't think that's appropriate and probably hasn't been appropriate. It keeps people out if we just teach them basic finances. Because if I have a father that invests and teaches me investment, which first you need a father to invest, or a mother to invest, or a mother and a father to invest, maybe even a grandma, grandpa. And the second part is they have to explain it to you and explain it to you in a way that helps you and empowers you to do it. So again, that's another problem. So if we take people above addiction, they have to learn how to invest their money. So there are different. So I just want to try to explain that I'm not saying just help the addicts, but you have to get to that. And again, if you guarantee somebody a minority contract, you're helping to raise the income of minorities, but yet we saw some game in there. The minority person was just a middle person, and they're farming the contract out to others. So the contract wasn't a minority. The contract was going to non-minority businesses because the person that secured the contract used somebody else that wasn't a minority. So again, we have to, again, that whole thing is, it just really doesn't help lift the bottom up, except for maybe here or there. So the first thing you have to do is you have to do the Inside Safe program for Black people. But again, can you defend in court that you're doing it for Black people and you're not doing it for white people? Or you're increasing that for Black people, but not white people? I mean, let's go to that woman that was speaking about the rhino trank, I guess they call it, the new, or was she talking about trank? I think she was talking about trank, but I can't remember. But it could be, I'm sure she calls it trank, and it could be rhino trank. But who's peeping? She's a young white lady who's peeking in the window of a Black guy. So when it comes to the people that are out there, I don't think race matters. And what you're doing is her and the other white people are being disenfranchised because in any city, you have the Elon Musks and people like that, the Ken Griffin. You're saying, well, we're not going to give you, well, yeah, Ken's leaving now, so the income for the white people going to drop. But this is the point. And you say it all the time. 1.5% of the wealth is held by these people, and the majority of those people are white. And that's going to, when you look at statistics, it's going to tell you something crazy. There's a lot of wealthy white people, but again, if I'm living in AOC's district and I'm white, I probably carry a gun, but well, it's racism, man. I'm white. They might think I'm Jewish. I am Jewish, actually. I would have to carry a gun. But I'm not that income, right? If I'm that person. And in fact, we see the Black addict in Kensington peeking in the window while the white addict woman tells them about the new drugs that make them sicker than they've ever been. Now, you have to understand something about Putin. He's okay with that. He wants to prove how our system is not superior to the Soviet Union. I'm telling you, that's part of what's happening. So does China. So that's okay with him. He likes that. But again, I was in the mine. I don't know if they're going to receive it. And I said, I think the first conclusion is that nobody benefited from the war. That's the first. There should be a bilateral statement, or you can include the United States, that nobody benefited from the Russian-Ukrainian war. Nobody. There's no way Russia can make up for what it's lost, even if it had all the riches of the Ukraine. Again, you've lost people that would be doctors and surgeons and scientists. Could have. You may have killed in the Ukrainian war may have been Satan's way to kill the people that were in place to cure cancer. United Nations is a failed organization. It's playing too many games, has too much self-interest. As soon as, again, the way you play it off, and I don't know where all the diplomats and the politicians and all the real people went. I guess we're living no life. But you go to Russia and go, oh my God, they're doing what to your people? We'll send the team in right away. The idea that they had to pull out of Ukraine before you would talk to them was a failed concept. What we had the day before the ground war actually started was better than we had that next day and better than anything we've had since. So that's what you wanted to maintain. And the only way to do that was to, I wouldn't say grovel, but you had to show a real interest, even if they were bullshitting. If you bullshit back, you throw them off. When you refuse to hear their complaint, they won. But again, they lost. So again, I'm getting off topic here. But again, no, I'm not actually. Racism and bias are universal. And there is, I don't know what level, but the complaints that Russia had were valid by the fact of that fact. And one thing about Europeans, I'm not going to say they have more biases than anyone else, but when they have a bias, it's all there is. If they want to, if they have something that drives them, then they drive with it. So by the nature of racism and bias being universal, and by the nature of the personality of Europeans in general, I will tell you that yes, there was racism in Ukraine against Russians. Or whatever you want to call it, bias. And again, the idea is in 2013, I was part of something, but again, they killed me, you let them kill me, and I probably lost focus. But you all are in paid positions. You're supposed to monitor that and take care of that. You can't let it just fester like that. In 2020 something, he invades. I mean, why is it there? Then the stories where Putin's going to be gone in a day. Quit doing that. People believe you. You have to understand something about Kim, and you have to understand something about Putin. They own the countries they lead. No, they're not just leaders. They own it. You're not going to do anything there. Why you let that guy go back to Russia and be killed is beyond me. Did you really believe he was going to overthrow Putin? There's no way that a CIA should have let him go back. You can stop him. And then give him the real job that maybe you could have him, if you still wanted to counter Putin, but counter Putin in a way that would allow him to live. And again, that might be relative to whether Putin gets to him or not. Well, I think your belief in your capability to counter Putin actually made the problem worse. And the United Nations should have taken action in the Ukraine and essentially doing all they could to freeze the playing field instead of ordering Russia to do something. At that point, it was obvious they weren't going to just pull out. Russia lost big. Even if Russia were to gain all of Ukraine, they lost. Because they entered into a war that was useless. I've articulated that we have no body to work these issues out. There should have been, when the Cold War came down, not NATO and Russia battling each other. There should have been either Russia brought into NATO or a new organization formed that included Russia. I mean, the United Nations is really stupid when you look at it. Somebody's always vetoing something, so we never get anywhere. Right. So what's needed is a new universal order of negotiation that meets routinely in each nation. Now we have the G7 and G6, but that's kind of phony. So again, it has to be something in the lines of every time we meet, it's a SALT II talk or something like that. Again, the idea of Putin coming to the United States, nothing wrong with that. Why? Why do we have a problem with that? Stupid. Putin comes to the United States, Trump goes to Russia. As long as they're not trying to kill each other with spies during the visit, then, you know. It's the only way to do it. I mean, there was a small opposition to Gorbachev, but, you know, we weren't assholes back then. Hey, this could be the greatest thing ever. And I think Putin is kind of heated because the Soviet Union lost all of that landmass, but they already own one of the largest landmass nations in the world. I think it may be the largest. And in fact, what do they call that? You attract more bees with. I forget the statement, but again, if Russia took the United States model and it wasn't military conquest, they probably would have an outsized influence in Ukraine to begin with. And it kind of did, but again, you have to allow for democracy to a certain degree in certain nations. You didn't have to do it in Russia because why? Because again, the KGB owned Russia before the wall came down. The KGB owned Russia when the wall came down. So that part didn't change. But Ukraine fought the KGB during the Cold War, secretly. Right? Wasn't owned. So the model in Russia would not work necessarily in Ukraine. But again, if we didn't get to this, the United States always had an influence over Canada for a period of time. You could have had it like a Canada. You had beneficial trade agreements. So again, the bias and the racism is universal, and that's what theoretically led to the Ukraine-Russian conflict. But again, the people that are racist and have bias will tell you that it's fair. But it's not. We still look at each case by case. So I think the first part of what should happen there, and we'll get back to New York City in a second, and then it's going to be brief at that point, is that both sides agree that neither side could ever compensate enough. If Ukraine took all of Russia and Russia took all of Ukraine, they can never compensate for the loss of years of the war and the loss of people. And it's more than the loss of people. It's the loss of peace of mind. So I think that's the starting point. Let's not fantasize about one day conquering all and getting everything we ever wanted and it was all worthwhile, because it wasn't. I mean, when there was all of a sudden a slowdown in the Iranian conflict, I had concern. Again, I'm a Persian Gulf veteran, and you deal with it, and then that's it. You leave advisors, special ops, radar systems. So in New York City, the problem hasn't been discovered yet. I think if you look honestly at poor New Yorkers, you'll find a universal truth to their lives. And you're not going to throw money at it and fix it alone. And again, some of the things that you're trying to move, also the protection of the immigrant, is actually disenfranchising certain New Yorkers, including Black New Yorkers. But I don't think the when we look at people in certain income brackets, I don't think it's the picture isn't what you saw it is. I mean, the average income includes some very wealthy white people that have nothing in common with poor New Yorkers. Again, so the statistics will probably require you to look at, I don't know how they break it down, neighborhood by neighborhood, district by district, or I don't know if you can. I think borough by borough may be too large. Maybe. I guess the best way to break it down is we look at we have people representing. You have it broken down into I don't know. We don't live there. Aldermen, council people. See, New York City. Here we go. Council members and districts. 51. So we break it down into 51 districts, and then we look at the economy in each one of those districts. And we might get a better picture. And we identify where our poorest New Yorkers are. So Inside Safe type of program, you're already moving on that program. That's probably going to net you a lot. Again, it costs money. If we can, the revolving door thing occurs because we just do detox and rehab, or we throw them in jail. That aftercare is actually probably cheaper than anything else. It looks expensive, right? I'm going to feed you. I'm going to put you in a place. I'm going to keep you going in counseling. It looks expensive, but it's probably, I guarantee you, because of the revolving door issue, the crime, the prison time, all of that. Again, these are crimes. In some cases, it costs life for the victim. So you're actually saving lives. Not just the cost of law enforcement and corrections and housing while they're in prison or in jail. It's one of the most expensive housing options that we have as government, is to put somebody in prison. So you have to. Some of these districts aren't poor, I guess. Let's see, where do we have? There's a couple areas that aren't poor. And Manhattan's notoriously not poor. Generally, I know maybe a poor section. Right. Well, the greatest, if you read religions, you read the holy books of the various religions. The greatest thing you can be is somebody to help somebody of a different race, generally, or somebody of a different culture. Now, again, I know you speak about the immigrants. That problem years ago, yeah, I was one of the people that helped you get DACA for it. But again, there's limitations within all of it. My DACA was a little different than your DACA. But mine made sense. Yours is reckless. Well, each one of these people, each one of these 51 people have people they represent, and a portion of those people are the poorest people in New York City. You may even find it in Manhattan. You may find like 2 people that are poor in Manhattan. Yeah, there's a guy that lives in the. He's a maintenance guy in one of the buildings. He lives there, but he doesn't make much money. And I guess they make pretty good money. You have to be careful. You have to actually, when you hire people in those buildings, you have to be careful. Right. So it's just like why do correctional officers make the money? Why do federal agents make it? Because you can't have them below a certain money, or they're corrupt anyway. But certain ones, but you have to pay them a livable wage, or they'll take money. That's what my complaint in San Fe was. The cops were so underpaid that it was almost demanding that they work some side jobs, which is where the narcos pick up, secure my club, secure this. I don't know what. I'm not speaking from fact as far as what the side jobs were, but that's what it's and whether it worked, because a lot of them just said, "Hey, I'm going to go live in Albuquerque, so I can afford to live somewhere." But if your cops aren't making enough money, ask yourself: is the system forcing them to take money from outside bosses? That's one of the investigative models I developed, or hypothesis, whatever you want to call it. So these 51 people in the council are very important. Well, again, as far as why you need tax money, this is part of it, because your people are so poor and they're addicted to narcotics and they don't have housing, and some have housing, and right. The idea, and I brought it up years ago, is always to move everybody along. You can't always move everybody where they want to be, but always find something for your wealthy, something you can do for your wealthy. Like before you raise tax on the wealthy, you should be able to explain something or do something for them. And part of the explanation is, and again, your history is not well when it comes to the money that you're getting for the what people call entitlements. So it's a social safety net. It also helps. You have to understand, Elon Musk didn't make his money in a vacuum. He made it off of the United States of America and its system. Now he is propped up, and all billionaires are propped up. Somebody is protecting and giving them that money. It's just a fact of life. You're not going to make $1 billion on your own. You're part of a system. But that system plugs into the United States and takes advantage of what the United States is, and that's all of us. We're all part of that system. But you should have been able to speak. You should have sat down with some of your wealthiest people and said, we need money. What can we do? And, Ken Griffin make it look, I'm doing the best I can. I tell my people to donate. I donate. But again, generally, if you respect people at that level, who needs the money that Ken Griffin actually owns? He doesn't need it. He's got more than he needs. But there's a point there. And then he has people that work for him. He wants to make sure they have money and that you're not taking their money more than you should be. I don't even know what I have. The Awakening. What is it? I don't know what it's even being called there. Why is it doing that? Why does it do that? I guess because I can't do this for some reason. I don't know if there's an option I can select so it doesn't do that. I can go online with the other one, but it's just a bunch of pages with the city council, but it's not going to work to go through this other window. Right. Actually, it's over here too. Why? I guess because they balance off of one another. We'll go back to this. But Right. So you have an army of council people. 51 is a pretty good number. Each one of them has a financial situation and an economic situation within their district. And that's how you have to break down that's the best way probably to break down your income and all the other types of things. Again, if you're serving the poorest people of your community, it it's it should actually take care of itself. So we need to restudy the first thing you have to do is restudy who your poor people are. As far as racial breakdown, it causes it to be dishonest because you have a lot of wealthy white people, right? They have nothing in common with the poor white people. And when you help the Latinos, you're going to take jobs away from your black community. But we know the Latino community distributes narcotics more so than any other community. So there's a lot there. You have to live with the truth. You have to live with the truth. What I would do is I would break your city down into 51 districts, your 51 council districts, and then work on who's poor based upon that. But in reality, you could actually have you could have poorer white people actually. if the majority of the wealth in New York is held by 1.5% or 2%, and that 2% is overwhelmingly white, you could skew the results so that your poor white people aren't represented at all, and that's what's happening, I think. But I don't think your white people are the poorest, but I think it's universal, and there's universal truths to that poverty. And so you can't put money into the pockets of black people and fix your problem, especially if they're using narcotics. It'll make your problem worse. So you're already moving, I think, an inside safe type of program. It's to figure that one out more. And again, if you get to the point where you can build tiny homes, that's very important. Humans are mammals and they crave that little space. Well, the fact is, I don't know. I'm sure there's lots. Where you built that got flooded though, so you'd have to do some major rework there. And again, that neighborhood I think was complaining. But any open space, you can create a tiny home community. And I'm even speaking a little smaller than what we're seeing. Not the really snazzy ones. Now, the issue we have in Kensington, that's clinical. So in your areas that are like that, that's a clinical problem, right? That's serious. A lot of the places that Vic is going to and the people he's speaking to, they're not Kensington level loss. And it's not all of Kensington. There's lesser cases within Kensington and other sections of Philadelphia. So just so you know what just happened, I connected into Kensington and Philadelphia, and I saw. So that's why I changed, I didn't read that anywhere. And remember, I read it. My peeps over in Philly connected it. and we picked their brain. Could be Vic too. Vic could be in the middle of that, and his people. Right. So, as the court said, that they take case by case bias cases. That'll never go by the wayside. So, what everybody's saying about them is false. That's poverty. Also, it's case by case. We need to start looking at people as people. So I would get your council busy with people that do the statistics. Again, you have to trust your statistic people. You can't use people that are activists. They generally will lie. The only reason I can do this is because I risk my affiliation with anything and everything for the sake of the truth. Not to say that I'm perfect. Nobody's perfect. It's the nature of this planet. So get your council people hooked up with people that do statistics, and your council people should be looking at their people. Each person has a representation, every one of them, white, black, yellow, blue, indifferent. I throw the blue race in there because there's discrimination against blue now. But again, I told the blue race people, if you discriminate against one another, it's going to get you. And we saw the Islamic woman that works with Zoran there. She discriminated against blue. So to her, he's not Arabic anymore. He's not Islamic anymore. He's not part of affirmative action and DEI. He's now blue. And she's going to discriminate against blue for doing his job. He's the same person to make sure that she can stand there and not get raped. That's the fact that she should understand. But again, they're dirty cops. But that's case by case. Again, this is the world we're supposed to be living in. So we all have poor people. We all have people addicted. Even in Manhattan, there's people addicted to narcotics. Back in Philly, the big thing was nobody knew who was addicted to heroin. And of course, heroin was safer than what we have out there now. But when I was younger, you never knew who was addicted to heroin until that batch of heroin that came in that was too strong. And then your doctors and your bankers ended up dead, along with the people on the street. Right. So the idea why the detox, rehab, and aftercare works is because it's a full system. You can't do detox and rehab and then put them out there. They need to be returned to life. There's a problem that precedes narcotics use, and that's the fact that they've come outside of the mainstream of society. They're outside of wellness, and something's there. That's where it's broken. You can't even just do aftercare and throw money at it. Here, live here, live here. You can't even just take the rich people's houses and say, "Oh, the addicts will live in here, and we'll only work 5 hours a week." Look, I'm retired. I've worked more than 40 hours probably every week, the whole time. I just had different projects as they were needed. Or I'm out on the street helping people that are homeless. I'm working for this nation. So all the council people need to realize they have broken people in their communities, and those broken people are your poor. But yet some might have some money that may need some help. So we need to redecide, refigure who actually needs help in New York City the most. And generally, it's going to be your people on the street. And you're already moving with that. But you have to maintain intelligence. Your people are going to be jaded by the nature of the difficulty of that work. So you have to understand, you have to figure out how to unjade them. They can't have biases. LA Insight say if you have a few antiquated thoughts, the more you speak, the more I see. And I don't get a chance to look all that much. When somebody is not ready, that means we're not ready. Do you understand that? They're perfect where they are because there's a reason they're where they are. They didn't do it on their own. Maybe you didn't do it, but somebody did. And you can't put it on them that you're not ready, you messed up, because metaphysically you just killed them and they may never get back to the program. In fact, if I tell you that you're screwed up and you're out of my program, where are you going to go? You can go out on the street, you're going to buy something, you have no clue what's inside of it, but all you know when you use it, you feel better. You see, they don't fail the program. I don't know what you're going to do, but you have to find a place for them. And it can't be the same place on the street using narcotics. Well, you just have to build that next step down. And that's why I suggested the encampments with counseling. You build like what a normal campground would look like. You have some administration buildings or an administration building with offices, and make sure you put, I'm telling you, put your security cameras in. So we don't have somebody murdered in one of those rooms. It happened in New York a couple times, things like that. They don't have to hear what's going on, but they should be able to watch what's going on in those rooms. And again, we don't want to volunteer dealing dope to the camp community either. So again, when you tell somebody they failed your program, you failed as a program. But you failed as a program because there was something that happened, because that's what it is. You have to find the place for you people using narcotics that you control. But yet there is a forgiveness, because essentially if it's an encampment and maybe even just a little tiny room place, industrial interior that you can hose out, that's recommended. You just coat it, get them to coat it with some sort of, heavy coating, the walls and the floors. I'm not saying a rubber room, but something like that might work. Just make it livable, comfortable, because that's the nature of metaphysics. That's the nature of psychology. That's the nature of narcotics use. Even Vic, I just thought about this because this just came up. Vic has to be careful. He does use the term disappointed, which is a good term to use. But if you say disappointed to the wrong person, you can cause them to use more. See, this is the problem with the program. Why it never seems to work, because these are damaged people. And with damaged people, if you say something that is innocuous to everyone else, the damaged person may run off and use some narcotic and never want to see you again. Because remember, the person's using narcotics because there's something there. Narcotics is not their issue, and narcotics is a demonic possession. It's a demon. It's not a psychology. Now, there are psychological manifestations while that possession occurs. And you can't just heal somebody necessarily metaphysically overnight. Part of that metaphysical healing is that the right program, the right doctor, the right whoever, social worker, finds that person. So, she's a great person. I really appreciated seeing her. And I'm, originally from Philadelphia, and we lived, at least in the beginning of my life, in places where the city was mixed, well mixed. and we met people like her. I was in Baltimore as a deputy U.S. Marshal, and I worked other places, New York, D.C., L.A., over the years, and met people. And she reminds me of some of those because we, well-thinking people. But the idea that somebody fails your program has to be presented differently. I don't have all the answers here because I'm not there. Because if you say to somebody, you weren't ready yet, you're releasing them from something, but not the inferiority complex. You say for some reason our program wasn't ready to handle, and it isn't. There has to be a place for somebody that you can't put into inside safe, and outside somewhat safe is probably better. So that's where you will establish your encampment zones and provide not a housing, an administrative building or buildings that allow for the community of volunteers, the community of clinicians and social scientists that we have to come in there and reconstruct that person. Now, it isn't as simple as saying, oh, your mother beat you and this is why you're using heroin, because, or whatever drug they're using, is because there is, that could be part of it, but there's a series of things that we need to identify. ADHD. Everybody has ADHD to a certain degree. When it when it gets to a certain point, then it becomes an issue. Every mental illness, you ever see them when they do that? Well, this guy, we should have known he was doing this and he was doing that. And I'm like, I know people that are wealthy in life, having a great life, and they do this and they do that. I don't know them, but I see them. So each person has a series of things. When that panic, brain chemistry, alpha, beta, there are people out there and they are affiliated with narcos and sex traffickers now that use that psyop and that psychological stuff that the corrupt CIA leaked along with the KGB and everyone else. That changes your alpha and beta waves. I wish I could find that. I'll have to try to find it. I was studying deep state when it started because I was like, deep state, let me see what this is. Because I was already talking about the deep state before they coined the term deep state. So I started Googling it and it came up with deep states of the mind. I'm like, aha. And I knew they were already altering people's psychology on purpose to ruin them. I believe that's part of what the hostile takeovers were. Remember, there was a period of hostile takeover. So you didn't want your psychology ruined, you gave up your business. But I discovered that, they were altering alpha, beta, delta waves. They're still out there, pretending they're saving the world while they destroy it for Satan. So again, these people, whether it's Satan, I know for a fact, but these people can curse you and Satan will act on their curses because he's part of their world and they're part of his world. He will rewire your life into what clinical, and this is what they do physically, what clinical psychology says what caused mental illness in certain people. Again, this is what I'm getting at as far as what you have to figure out. They will reverse engineer clinical psychology. Clinical psychology is there for you to fix what was broken in somebody's life. The CIA type people, the narcos that use CIA type people, the KGB and their drug organizations and their prostitution rings and all the stuff that they're all into have taken clinical psychology and reverse engineered it What can I do to you to cause that mental illness, or at least an appearance of it? At first, it'll be temporary. That's why they stay at it. Oh, he looks like he's offending again or getting ready to offend. I got to go. What that means is the person is succeeding in life and they're beating the mental illness that they put in their life. I'm not here to shut up any of you. Those days are long gone. So again, you have to discover where the life broke. It may not be readily available. Oh, your mother hit you, but what else happened? Because some people, their mother hits them and they're fine. Everybody's different, but I believe our narcissism problem is larger than we know. Oh, you were in a hostile work environment. Well, maybe it wasn't that your mother hit you, or that they discovered your mother hit you, and they designed a psychological program which would enlarge that trauma and work off of that trauma to further harm you as they cause additional trauma. So nobody fails a program fails the person. Otherwise, you're chump change and need to be replaced with somebody who knows what they're doing. Stay peaceful. Praise God in all that they do. Or praise God in all that we do and you do. But don't do. Praise God.